Let's do it. Welcome to the Women Inspired Podcast. I'm your host, April Seifert. There is nothing more powerful than a woman who is inspired to action, and that's my number one goal, to inspire you, my listeners, to take action in your lives. Each week, I get to interview some of the most inspiring women, and I'm bringing those interviews to you. Let's do it. Oh my gosh, I am so excited for this week's interview. This week, you are going to meet a powerhouse of a woman. She is just incredible. Think about it this way. This woman has been to Sheryl Sandberg's house twice. Linda Brandt promotes worksite wellness as a part of a team at Hennepin County Public Health Promotion. In her role, she supports healthy organizational cultures through sharing low and no-cost resources. In her free time, she founded and co-manages a growing chapter of Lean In circles inspired by Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. Her groups have grown from about 12 people almost 4 years ago to over 2,100 currently. Well, I would love to welcome Linda Brandt to the podcast. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you.
It is so good to have you here because I have been following your work for quite a while, and as I put together the list of people who I wanted to interview for this podcast, you were very high up on that list. So this is a really exciting day for me. I'm really pumped. So,
thank you.
Yeah. So I gave everybody a little bit of a bio about you, but I'd love to hear about you, your background, who you are in your own words.
Sure. I am from Minnesota. Lots of people mistake me as from someplace else because I'm pretty direct. I feel very much at home in New York City. I love getting right to the point with people, love to say what's really important, what's really going on, what are you thinking about. And I am a middle child in the middle generation. So I'm an Xer in a middle child with an older brother and a younger brother. And I grew up with two parents. My mom was a family child care provider. So basically 10 kids at most,
wow,
plus my two brothers in my home on a typical day.
She's a superhero.
She taught me that you can do a lot. I would think of her as someone who can move refrigerators.
Absolutely.
Like, you don't need help to move a refrigerator, and what I learned from her. But I also, on the other side, got a big dose of scarcity from her. So I grew up knowing that your vision you get tunnel vision if you're afraid of not having enough. So that has also been a pretty big marker from my early life, was powerful female leader in my family. My dad was an employment counselor, which there's some overlap with my current job, which I have to sort of eat my hat or kind of eat crow around because I used to look down on people who did their parents' jobs. But now we get older and get wiser. So I also grew up with a big love of animals. So my mom had made sure that we always had animals around, 2 litters of puppies. And I thought at some point I might become a veterinarian, but I'm really practical. And so it's really not surprising that I end up in public health, because that's trying to get everybody healthier so that they can do cool things with their lives.
Nice. Very cool. How long have you been in public health?
I've worked at Hennepin County doing worksite health promotion for 10 years.
Nice.
So about that amount before I got my graduate degree here at the University of Minnesota.
Nice. It's super important work. I mean, having a little bit of a background in the healthcare space as well, see a lot of things that you can do to help improve population health and help people make real, I guess, feelable changes in their lives. It's a really cool set of work. So
very passionate about.
Mm-hmm. I actually found you from your work with the Lean In organization. Can you tell me a little bit about that and just about how you got started with that work?
Yes. I didn't come to this work kind of, just out of nowhere. I was leading a women's support group for 6 years as part of a peer counseling community. And so I knew that this was really important, that women get together in groups and share what they're thinking, how it's going in life, what they're passionate about. And at some point, my assistant moved as one is wont to do, one's well supported and things are going well, went off, traveled abroad, and the group fell apart. And I was hosting a mom support group at my house, and I was just thinking, where is my group? And I remembered that Lean In was an idea that captured my imagination earlier. Actually, Sheryl Sandberg, the COO of Facebook, gave a commencement speech at Barnard College. And I really was struck by what she said. In particular, she said, don't leave before you leave. And what I heard from that was, don't settle. Mm-hmm. Don't scale back and make yourself less powerful, because then things will never change. Mm-hmm. So I had been waiting for someone to give that message to push females out. And I want to be really clear that Lean In is for women to pursue their ambitions, but actually it's also for anyone who wants to see women go after their ambitions. So it wasn't done perfectly, thank goodness, because that's not great for women to try to do things perfectly. But it should have included men a little more upfront. So mm-hmm. Lean In Together, Minneapolis St. Paul, has always known that it was welcoming to men. It's a little hard to be in a minority, as we all well know, if we're female, but it started with just 12 people, and now it's over 2,000, and it's been life-changing and amazing and just thoroughly passion and a calling and a source of satisfaction in my life for the last about 4 years.
That has to feel so good. It has to feel so good to spend your time and put your energy behind a cause that feels so authentic and important.
Yes. And I would say in particular, given that my work life is about getting people in the right situations in their work lives and healthy, and not just physical health, but social, community, career, financial, mm-hmm. all of that, the career health is the driver, according to Gallup. And to do that work in my free time is incredibly satisfying. And I would also say, personally, to see how much I've grown, so that I'm not just helping other people, but I am getting huge benefits myself, to see my perspective expanded of what I think is possible for the people around me and in the world.
Tell me a little bit more about that. That's really interesting, because I can imagine that going into an area like this and putting, your time and energy into it, and meeting the types of people that you have, hearing the stories that you've heard, all of that, it would have to change you. Tell me a little bit more about that.
So 6 months after I started this group of 12 people, a lot of things happened in terms of talking to the Associated Press and putting my story out publicly on the web. And that all kind of came to fruition or something 6 months later, when Sheryl Sandberg was going to come to my house.
Oh my God. Okay, I was going to ask you if you know Sheryl Sandberg. This isn't I've met Sheryl Sandberg and got to shake her hand one time she's been to your house. That's crazy.
It was completely crazy. I thought maybe it would get canceled last minute. I made it about at least 100 phone calls telling people, because this will date this podcast. It was a time in which people answered the phone occasionally and said, oh my, and I just said, I cannot tell you in an email. I cannot tell you in a text. I'll either have to Skype you, drop by where you work, or I'll have to call you up and hear that this is happening. And partly because I had put my story out there and I had been vulnerable in a way that I had not typically been, and let people know that my house was important to me. So the key part of the story is when Sheryl came, she was here for the Grace Hopper conference, which I would want everyone who's at all related to women in computing to know about this conference. It seems like it really changes a lot of lives. So she was here for that conference. She wanted to recognize circles, that these are often in people's homes. And so come to Linda's home. She wants to build community. That happened. And a woman in my original circle said, I see you in Sheryl's living room. And I thought, well, no way in heck, because she's here for a conference. This is her media tour. That's, that makes sense. It's a venue. She's here. That's all well and good. But I will never be in her living room.
Right.
So a year later, when I was in her living room, I said to myself, this is why you expand your circle, so that people can say things to you like, hey, I see you in an impossible situation. And then when I was in her living room again this summer, so for the second time, and she clearly is using her power for good and wanted people to know that we have a special relationship. She just knows, okay, I can change Linda's life by letting people know she's not just anybody. Her late husband is from Minneapolis, Dave Goldberg. So she has a special place for Minneapolis, St. Paul. And she also has a special place for us because we've collaborated with the military circle and that we have been helpful to the Lean In Foundation. We have gone out of our way to be the Midwesterners that we all want to be: friendly, hospitable, generous. Mm-hmm. And I have played a really key role in an international Lean In leaders movement. And that is not something I ever thought would happen. When I got to meet the Lean In leaders from all over the world, many of them are firstborn. Many of them speak many languages. Many of them have been leaning in since 6 months or 3 months old. They have been leaning in. Leaning is not a new concept for most of them. And I would say I am like the majority of the world's women, and potentially actually majority of the world's people, in that I have not had high expectations my own entire life. Right. I have not been given the message of, go, you're powerful, you can do it. Unleash your power and be careful who you hurt because you are, you are a force to be reckoned with. And so I have taken that on as, if someone pushes back on the Lean In message, I say, you know what? You're not the target group for Lean In. We are about unleashing a group that's been underestimated and that has been held back by lots of different things, personal and societal. So find those people and get behind them, because they are the majority of people. They are the woman who works across the street in the gas station who is struggling. They are the person at the hardware store who's trying to manage men in the store and getting lots of pushback. The majority of the world's women are really challenged to find a truer sense of themselves as powerful and connected.
I legit got a little adrenaline rush as I was listening to you say that, for a few reasons. One, I love how you owned the fact that you have had an achievement, that you played this very important role in the broader international Lean In organization. We all too often almost apologize when we talk about something that we've accomplished, and it so diminishes that accomplishment. It diminishes it to the outer world when we're talking about what we've done, but it also diminishes it, I think, to ourselves, where we stop realizing, or we start to see it as smaller than it actually is. And that's not the way to, I guess, build your confidence in the fact that, no, I can actually achieve some really seriously huge things, when if you actually do achieve them, you minimize them down to the point that they don't feel big anymore. So I love that you started it by saying, I played this huge influential role, period. I'm not going to apologize for it, and I'm not going to downplay it, because it isn't something that should be downplayed. That's just so awesome. And I love, too, your point about people don't realize how much power they actually have, and they don't realize how big of an impact they can make. And I just love that the message behind this movement is, no, seriously, you can do some amazing things. Just go run out there and do them. And be careful, like you said, who might end up in your wake. So I love everything that you just said. It's awesome. And you were in Sheryl Sandberg's living room, which is pretty cool.
She is leading in a way that I really admire. She'll talk about having her own Lean In circle that meets every month. She has had those women in her circle lead the Lean In leaders all over the world. So she's made sure that those women, in this case, are connected to the women who are carrying out this movement. And the generosity is there, the integrity is there, the modeling is there. After she has people in her home, she will open it up for questions in a way that really models, this is why we aspire to having power, because we can say things that are really challenging, just really on the edge. And I I have been surprised by what has happened over the last 3 years. And I'll say specifically some of the, I have been in many lean-in circles, an online lean-in circle, in-person lean-in circles, and even one at my workplace at Hennepin County. And all have been very distinctly different, but relationships have been built in all of those venues, let's say virtually, have turned into in-person as well. And we also have people attend our meetings via iPad occasionally. So just, again, expanding what is possible. That meeting with Sheryl in my living room, a woman from Mexico attended virtually and asked the first question. And because we had met in a virtual circle. And I think leading on this technology thing is something that's kind of surprised me. Now I know all these people in the STEM world and basically have championed those women because, of course, they're going to have a huge impact on our future. So to kind of play an ally role in same way I'm expecting men to be an ally around female ambition, I'm being an ally to women in engineering, women in the mechanics who are interested in the things that my mom would have done had she had more options. She would have been an awesome mechanic. So when people say, oh, we don't need lean in, I think, oh, yeah, we do, because we have so much untapped potential, just like in my mom's generation.
Absolutely. You've mentioned the importance of men in this movement a couple of times. Can you talk a little bit more about that? And maybe, the idea of being an ally and the impact that, men can have on this movement?
So I'll give a specific example of, as I was preparing to meet with Sheryl, I asked my friend Alexis, how do I think about this? Because I know he had met many powerful people in his lifetime. And he said, it's like meeting a genie. So they can grant your wish if they want to, but you better have them ready. And then he didn't solve the equation for me. He let me figure out, what do you ask for from a genie?
Wow.
More wishes. And he didn't say, here's the answer to the question. I had to come up with on my own. And then my friend Evelyn in North Dakota, who's a house cleaner, she said, then you better start writing reports. If you're going to build a relationship and get more wishes, start writing reports. So he had a perspective outside, life experience outside my own. So he could say it's like meeting a genie, which I could then implement and run with that. But he also has said repeatedly, women take things too personally. And I have seen that over and over again. You can imagine how much time and energy gets wasted with, oh my God, this person said this, and not directly confronting them. So men often, when they come to lean in or when they offer their perspectives, or let's say, obviously, the Prime Minister of Canada is an awesome example, can say men have a role in this movement because we have a stake in the society getting better, but we also don't get to do the nurturing and get the benefits of being close to young people, how things are currently set up. And I would say Carolyn Vrayman, who started off the lean-in movement at Hennepin County, very strongly said, we've got to have men at these meetings. I want to see us not just to have women run half our organizations, but men run half our homes. And if we don't have both pieces of that, she said, I'm not interested.
Wow.
So she put a stake in the ground for that. But I would say as well, the military women have said, we will not replicate what happened to us. We will do things differently. In the military, we have very traditional men and very untraditional women. So we know how the stereotypes and how the bias around gender holds everybody back, men and women in particular. So I think a lot of us have room to grow on that. We still think of the women's issues as women's issues versus all of our issues. We still think of caregiving and the things that we think are inherently female versus actually there is nothing that needs to hold us back about our biology. So I think it's a big room for us to move and to grow. And the Lean In website has resources under Lean In Together, which is actually how we started off. So we were a little ahead of the curve on that one. So Lean In Together, everybody.
I love it. That's so cool. That's actually the work, this podcast and the idea to start working on this type of work and starting to empower women and inspire women came largely out of a lot of the work that I did in graduate school. And it's so funny, when I read the book Lean In, I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. Why didn't I write this book? Because this is literally the reference section of half of the research papers I wrote in graduate school. Like, this is so cool to see it come to fruition and get out there in broader society. It's so neat. And exactly what you said about the stereotypes that we all carry around. And what's really interesting that people don't realize is in social, so I have my PhD in social psychology, and in that work, you learn what the academic definition of a stereotype is. And really, all it is your, think, reptilian brain learning from the environment around you. So people sometimes have this misconception that women can't have stereotypes about women and men can't have stereotypes about men. No, we all, our reptilian brains were, they're incredibly adaptive and they learn incredibly quickly and they learn associations from the world around us. And because we all grow up in a certain set of circumstances in a certain culture, we all kind of get the same set of stereotypes. So yeah, there's a lot of there's a role that both men and women play in keeping the status quo the way that it is. And I think there's room at that table for everybody to get together and have that conversation.
And I think too, when you have women in positions where they have influence and authority and power, they have a broader perspective. So when I hear Sheryl Sandberg say that all over the world, every culture, men should lead, women should do for others, that means something different from me than someone who read it in a book, that it's common, someone who actually has been out there in a bunch of different cultures and had experts telling her, what is the main issue? What is the bias here? And then her basically saying, okay, I checked with everybody. This is really the key issue we are expected to do for others, and people do not like it when we lead. Mm-hmm. And you will run into the likability bias. You will run into so people wanting you to fail, basically, and being happy when you fail, and not supporting you and undermining you. And I have heard so many stories of undermining since I started this project that I think we don't have room to tell those stories because they are embarrassing. And we think they reflect badly on us, that someone undermined us. But I think when you put yourself out there, you find out, oh, guess what? There's this whole other world of people who did take risks and it didn't go very well. And this is kind of the fuel of why it didn't go well. Some people are like, what were you thinking? That doesn't, that doesn't somehow feel right, what you're doing. So.
Right. Yeah. And what's tough about it is that it's hard to pinpoint. People do feel that dissonance, or they feel that friction, but they don't know why they feel that. You can't put your finger on it like, yeah, I know, but she just doesn't feel nice enough. And it just feels like this bit of friction that's really hard for a lot of people to put their finger on. But in essence, it really is just this inequality at work. And again, going back to the academic definition of a stereotype, I like to use that definition a lot because it's not to take responsibility off of people from working toward equality now. But what I mean to do by focusing on, no, it's not that you intentionally put these stereotypes in your mind. This happened to you because you grew up in this culture. I want to take some of the feelings of maybe blame or people feeling bad because they have these thoughts and beliefs. This happens to all of us, but what's on us and what the responsibility is on us, in my opinion, is that we all need to just be open about the fact that they exist and think about together how we might do things better. And there shouldn't be, so much finger pointing and bad feelings with that. It's just, hey, here's the situation we're in. What can we do now? And let's work together toward it.
So we have had, the Lean In Together community has had a chance to work with a girls group called Girls United. And Leanin.org in California set us up together. They didn't know we were in the same place. They just said, oh, Linda's a coach for Lean In leaders, so connect. And the Girls United groups were members were being targeted in their schools by the boys. So they courageously decided to meet with them. And the boys just let them have it around, we think that you should be making babies and staying home.
Wow.
Now, clearly, they inherited those values, and it was crushing in some ways. But most of us said to them, you are getting the unfiltered sexism that you will never hear probably the rest of your life. You are getting it pure. This is how we think of you as lesser and inferior, and you have a role that has only to do with caring for others. You're hearing it, but you will not hear it again. It will always be more subtle, most likely given where they're going to be traveling in their lives. And I think it's been interesting to have that relationship with younger women and see what their focus is a little bit different, and also to see the commonality around what do we need to open our eyes to. I would also say, going back to the question of where men can play a role, that my former husband, Tim, has been on me all of my life to say men do not want to give up the power. I think that his perspective is women need to wake up, because you think it's all nice out there, and men are happy with the status quo in a way that you are not really willing to fully look at.
Wow.
Like economically in particular, there will be a shift that will not benefit men. I think in every other way, as far as I can tell, men will benefit from women becoming more powerful and taking leadership, or having a more nurturing culture, having a culture that's respectful. That will all benefit men. But economically, there is going to be a loss, most likely, for men. As Warren Buffett said, I only had to compete with half the population. Just put it right out there that the competition, we know on many levels that the competition is going to be greater in the future for all of us as the world becomes more global. And that's scary and threatening. But for men in particular, there will be a loss of status that they'll need to figure out another way to identify them and see themselves. This is a big transition for them.
What I think is interesting is a lot of the time, we look at, and in a lot of the work that I did in graduate school, we looked at it as, no, it's not a zero-sum game. But in some respects, I guess economically, maybe there is, there will be a shift there. That's really interesting to think about. Something else that you brought up, too, when you were talking about men earlier is giving them the opportunity to do some of the nurturing and caregiving roles. And what I think is going to be really interesting about that is the potential for, I think one misconception, I'll start by saying one misconception that I think people have when they look at women who are pushing really hard in their careers and that who want to achieve in that way, that somehow that devalues the nurturing activities that other people do. And in fact, what we're really saying is, no, we should value all of these things as highly as each other. We shouldn't look at any of those nurturing, caring for others activities as being somehow lesser. And if we all, meaning men and women, have the opportunity to participate in both spheres, or all, it's not even both, it's more than that, but all spheres of life, we start to see those activities as just as valuable as each other. So the work that families do to raise their kids is certainly as important as the work that they do to, provide and keep the economy going. It's just today we don't see it that way societally.
Yeah, the one thing I really wanted to make sure I had a chance to say is that there are, one of the best things about Lean In is the lean in stories in which women did things that they didn't think they could do. And in some ways, I've told my own Lean In story here of like, I didn't think this was possible. But I would say the book, The Spirit Catches You When You Fall Down, has a story of a Hmong child with epilepsy. And the author, Ann Fadiman, compares basically in my mind, she compares the skill level of the foster mother and the skill level of the neurosurgeon or the neurologist. And really, you can see that the parenting skill is just as amazing in healing of that young person as the ability of this trained medical person. And until we have those stories and we can fully hear wow, like, and be impressed the way we should be with how parenting done well is spectacular. We're all going to have to be kind of, you know, there's a certain level of pretense when we've all been trained to trivialize that work, to say it's the most important work, when clearly we don't value it enough to pay for it.
Right.
We don't support it societally. We don't have parental leave across the board. So we do not follow through on that. I think there's work to be done to not just claim that work as important, but help people come along, that this is actually really challenging. Developing human brains is amazing work. Not just broken human brains, but normal human brains.
Right. Yeah, it is. It's incredibly challenging and it's incredibly important. And when you put it in the context of the broader conversation we're having about, you know, equality and how the opportunities that people are given, it becomes, you start to see it as even more important how I talk to my daughter about what she can and can't achieve, and how, you know, if I had a son, how I talk to him about that becomes important, because they're going to be leading companies someday, and they're going to be the ones setting the policy and agenda of how, you know, culture works as they get older. So it becomes even more important that we talk to our kids about these things, and it just adds another layer to an already very complex job as a parent.
Yeah, and I particularly have appreciated the mothers who are leading lean-in circles have told their stories of, here's the story I had with my son about menstruation. Here's the story I had with my son about double standards.
Wow.
I don't hear those stories in general in the culture. I'm really pleased to hear that there are people thinking about that, because I think our part in the difficulties that men have of expressing themselves and being vulnerable is a lot of women are still toughening up their boys because they don't feel strong themselves. And they're, on some level, this is my own thinking, they are acting out on that. I want someone to protect me, including my male child. And so we have to really embrace this idea of risk-taking and being bold and being willing to take risks as females, so we know how strong we are. Not just pushing out a baby, not just like my mom moving a refrigerator, not just physically, but mentally, to get up and to, when I talked earlier about these being underestimated and setbacks that women don't talk about, part of why we don't go into politics is we see women being attacked, like the mayor of Minneapolis in the Pointer Gate. And we think, oh, no, I do not want to go. I don't want to put myself in that vulnerable situation like that. And we have to get up, move on, handle it. We need to see that it's possible to not look to others to protect us in a way that's more traditionally female.
Right. Someone who is slated to be interviewed for this podcast in a few weeks. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag and say who, but it's somebody who has a fairly wide-reaching online presence. And one thing she talks about frequently is how tough it can be to read the comments that she gets on a lot of the content that she puts out there. And I think that's one of the things that we fear that there will be retribution somehow for us expressing our minds, even if it is. And I, as a former academic person, can give you evidence and peer-reviewed journal articles, and I can support my points like crazy. But even then, it still feels really scary to put those views out there and make those claims and think that you might face that backlash. It is terrifying.
Yep, and I constantly go back to the idea of thousands of people on their feet cheering for you and one person sitting down.
Totally.
And where does your mind go?
Yep.
Right there.
Absolutely
Evolution
does. Bias
to danger. And that is not just the female perfectionism and personalization. That is just that's just hardwired in us, fear of, oh my God, what's happening? That one person.
Mm-hmm. So from the last, 4 years of working with women in your lean in circles and other circles that you've visited and the international work that you've done with this organization, you've heard a lot from a lot of people. What are some things that we all who maybe haven't had that same exposure, maybe it's the top 2, top 3, I don't know, I'm not going to give you a number, but like, what are the really important things that we need to be really watching for and on the lookout for as we move through our careers?
I would say majority of people who come to lean in are leaning into leaning in. So they are looking to figure out, what is it that I want to do with my life? Now, that might be people in general, but I think when you are doing for others, you tend to forget, what is it that I am passionate about? What is it that I want to own and make my stamp? It's the idea of ambition is having influence beyond your immediate family. So ambition doesn't matter what you're doing on that small circle if you don't share it with a larger community. So figuring it, what would be so important to you that you would be willing to risk taking it out to the level of an ambition, to something you're willing to put your name to, attach to out in the world. Mm-hmm. So given that most females in particular are leaning into leaning in, to really be supportive anytime you hear someone with the inkling of what they might be passionate about. Or a colleague who said, Linda, it sounds like you found your calling. I remember that from like 3 years ago. Wow. Because she could identify, this looks like the thing that you should be doing with your life. And so feeding that versus like, oh, I'm not sure, are you able to do that much? It seems like you've been getting sick more. So the undermining comments, just being a little careful not being careful, but managing that seedling and making sure that you're growing the seedlings in your world from any group that's not been taught that they are the one who's going to make the key difference. So put it out there, stretch what you might even think is possible. You're going to make a key contribution to this. So being encouraging. And then also, I would say right after that is the skill of negotiation comes up on our surveys as the number one thing that women are lacking. And all over the world, we hear that same thing. And the leaders in Lean In are saying all of life is a negotiation. So if you come to that with asking for crumbs because that's how you've been taught, or you just don't have the skill to ask for more than what you want, which is still a foreign concept to me. I would ask for more than, so that you can be talked down to what you would, be so excited about. So negotiation is a skill that, thank God for that woman. Women don't ask, to put it out there that it's not your fault. Role play it. There's some funny commercials even around women talking to themselves in the bathrooms. So negotiation is going to help us free up our time and get men to carry the load. That's just direct line to, if you don't know how to negotiate, you're going to do more than your share. That's just how, that's the piece where it's societal that you're not being supported, but you're also, like you said, you're giving up your power by not saying what you really want, not knowing what you want and not asking for it. So I guess know what you want, figure out how to ask for it, even if you do it badly. So I won't go to the perfectionism, but I would say I've been a step parent, but I haven't had my biological children. So I haven't gotten a chance to see this played out. But I believe it deep down that girls need to be pushed out and boys need to be held close. And if we could all think of that when we're dealing with men and women as well, push those women in your lives out and get those men to say, I gave out these cards at the Y saying, you matter. And the men were like broken down by it. The women are like, thank you. Yeah, whatever. But the men don't get that message. So even subtle ways of saying you matter to men go a long way. So know what you want, figure out how to ask for it. And then I would say, thirdly, that whole risk taking. And that just hits so many issues of fall down, get scraped up, figure out ways to not fall back on addictions when things get hard, because you asked, one of the things I was thinking about in anticipation is what is keeping us from doing this plan? It's individualism. It's not being a collective, but it's also unhealthy coping mechanisms. that, you're not going to take risks if the way you pick yourself up is kind of taking yourself down at the same time. So figure out how to take risks in a healthy way.
Yeah, totally.
With support, with other people.
I think
and share it.
On the risk-taking side, something that people focus on so much is, if I try this, here's what might go wrong as a result of it. This is what might happen that is negative. And what I don't think and that's fine. I think, weighing out the potential path that something could take, that's totally fine. But we leave out half of the equation, which is if you don't try it at all, what are you going to miss out on had you succeeded? So if you mention negotiation, if you go in and you talk to your boss about increasing your salary because you probably deserve to get paid more. I'm just going to tell everybody who's listening this, you probably deserve to get paid more. I'd go ask for a raise this year. Definitely do it. But anyway, and if you do it, email me because I want to hear how it went and I want to be able to celebrate your story. I think that's just so awesome. So anyway, if you don't, or, you think about if I go in and I ask for a salary increase and they say no, that's just going to be mortifying and devastating. But do you want to think about what you're going to miss out on? What if they would have said yes and you didn't even try? Mm-hmm. It's just, you have to weigh both sides. And I don't think we do that very well.
I love that we both got to go to graduate school. And so I learned the word counterfactual, like the thing that didn't happen. And it's like, we need more discussion of not only opportunity cost, but there are words for this. For those who have more options in the world, they know that there are trade-offs. Like they have the language for that many of us are just getting familiar with, like, oh, there's something called a trade-off and I'm making it every time I make a decision. And
you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to everything else. And if you say no to something, there's an implication for you not doing it. So you have to think about it. One plug that I'm going to plug my own blog, which is totally cheesy, but I'm doing it anyway.
I love your blog.
I wrote a post on careerkindling.com. If you go over there and look for the post I wrote about salary negotiation, it's more than just your paycheck. So if you need a little bit more motivation to go negotiate for a salary this year, because again, you're probably not making as much as you could be, I would go over and check that out because there's so much more that hinges on just that one number of what your salary is. We're talking life insurance, we're talking 401k. I mean, so many things hinge on that number in addition to your take-home pay. So please do that this year. If you're going to set a New Year's resolution, please do that this year. Go ask for more money because you deserve it.
Yeah, and I will say why was it a big deal that I was in Sheryl's living room? I'll go back to that because when someone asked in the open questions about advice, she said, my best advice is on the Lean In website. I am not keeping it for you in my living room. Go to the Lean In website.
That's awesome.
Look at the piece about how to negotiate from that communal perspective that people are looking for from women, that there are some unique challenges that the likability bias will come back to hit you too if it looks like you're out for yourself as a female, because of our stereotypes. So I love that we're all kind of putting our minds in the same place around it's unfair. Know that it's unfair, that it's an unequal playing field, but you can have more information. And I love that I will take away from this conversation. You don't get, every those shots that you didn't take, you don't get any of them. And I love that you're so smart about money. I mean, that is the thing that I have been naive in my lifetime about is money. And I have met so many people in Lean In who know that money is important. We have to talk about it. I can tell that it's important for women to talk about sex, given that they're dealing with young people. But I'm learning to realize it's just as important. We can talk about money and security and where do we get it from? So, Absolutely. And I would say as well, the whole idea of knowing what you want and figuring out how to ask for it in this world right now of Kickstarters and GoFundMe, people like me, Linda Brandt, are happy to support you with your Kickstarter. Yes. You just need to ask us. I mean, maybe I only give you $5 or $1 because I'm feeling really like I've been generous to other people. It still matters that you put it out there, and people just get so excited when you know what you want and you ask for it.
Absolutely. So looking ahead, what's your next goal?
Lean In together locally took on that title because lean in sounds like more reinforcement of go out and do it yourself. And it's not. We are lean in with others by joining a circle, whether virtually or in person, or tell your friend in the military or your friend on the college campus. That together piece is essential. And over the last, let's say, 4 years, I have seen all of these separate groups doing work on negotiation, confidence, networking, whatever it is, but not collaborating. And that is a big waste on a meta level of us learning from each other and sharing resources. So a few of those people who have been organizing groups, Sally McGraw in particular, started the Midwest Feminist Brain Trust. So we want to have a free place where those leaders, feminist leaders, men and women, come together and collaborate. And to me, it should have been done by the foundations here locally a long time ago. That's fine. They didn't figure that out, so we get to do it ourselves. We need to have a place where we can come together and say, you're doing this cool thing. Did you know this? Or how can I support you? Or I know this person who can support what you're doing, or we have free space, or did you know this? So the Midwest Feminist Brain Trust is an attempt to get more collaboration happening in that same direction, to be part of a wider movement so that people don't need 4 years to figure out who are the other key players. I'll say in particular, Minneapolis Mad Women and our group have done a lot of the same work. And it could have happened for a long time that we didn't know about what the other person is doing or some of the challenges that they face. They're doing things clearly differently than we are. But it's great because they're powerhouses. They're in a particular industry. We are broadly defined, women of all ages, career stages, sectors of society. And there's a strength to that, but there's also a strength of bringing those people and keeping them in that community together, those women in the same kind of career field. So my next thing is to see what we can do if we collaborate on a more meta level. And obviously, my heart is also in what can we learn from the women in China? What can we learn from the women in India? Mm-hmm. What can we learn from the women in Toronto? What can we do when we share what we know and inspire each other to go places that we might not go without that push?
I love it so much. And I'm only one person with one tiny platform doing one tiny thing, but if there's ever anything that I can do to help collaborate, support someone, get them on this venue, on this podcast, whatever it is, please reach out, because I love the work you're doing. I think it's so important. It's so impactful. I think women are impacted by it even when they don't realize they are. The movement that's happening with all of us pushing toward equality and to have opportunities for all of us is something that's elevating everyone, even if you're, not in the position to be one of those people who are pushing really hard. So I think it's just so important, such important work.
Thank you.
So
it's great being on the same team with you.
Yes, this is awesome. So I have one final question before we wrap up today, and it's a question I ask every single person who's on the podcast. I'm putting together a Spotify Power playlist of very motivational songs that are curated by the people on this podcast. So I have to ask for your contribution to the playlist.
So something that played a key role in my evolution from being a secretary at Temple Israel to being a public health worker was a middle journey of being a body pump instructor. Nice. And as someone who hadn't listened to a lot of music, it was a crash course in every type of music. The song Fighter by Christina Aguilera stands out for me as it got people feeling like, bring it on. Whatever challenges that the society throws at me, people throw at me, it will just make me stronger. And so it seems very appropriate for 2016 into 2017.
I love it so much. That's awesome. I can't thank you enough for being here, for sharing your experiences, sharing your story, being open and vulnerable, and just being willing to come on and support this project that I'm working on. I'm hoping that these interviews and these episodes help inspire and drive other women to action. And I'm so excited to have had you as a guest. This has been great.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. I took so much away from my interview with Linda, and I really hope you got a lot out of it as well. If you're at all interested in what the Lean In movement might be able to do for you, I highly encourage you to visit Linda's show notes page on careerkindling.com to connect with her and learn more about the amazing work she's doing with this organization. Now, as I sometimes do, I'm ending this week's interview with a challenge. Listen to the women around you. Try to help them uncover their true passion and be encouraging when they find it. I can't describe how much it's meant to me to have people support me through the process of putting this podcast together. You truly never know how big of an impact you're going to have on another person. So go do it this week. Now, I have one more thing to ask. One of the ways this podcast reaches more women is by its ratings and reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. If you have a minute, it would mean so much to me if you would pop over to iTunes or one of those other places where you get podcasts and leave me a rating and a review. It would be really great. Thank you so much for being on this awesome journey with me, and until next time, have an inspiring week.